But when I started hearing, from interviews with some of the people fleeing, or in the hospitals, about how their entire family died, like maybe two people out of a family of seven, because they have large families there, survived. That doesn't bode well.
We're going to watch some Sunday today because Sunday is streaming about Israel.
I think, no, it's not French, who was released from captivity late last month, told a crowd of hundreds that she had warned, quote unquote, the Israeli government that military operations in Gaza were putting hostages at risk, and had unfortunately been proven right. Emotions were raw a day after news broke that Yotam Haim, Samer, I don't know how to pronounce that, Talalka, and Alon Shamriz had been killed by soldiers from their own side. Ben-Ami, whose husband, Ohad Ben-Ami, remains in captivity, told the crowd that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet should present a proposal to free the dozens of people still held by Hamas. There we go. Holding an hourglass, Ruby Chen, whose 19-year-old son, Itay Chen, is still being held hostage, said the government needs to be active in getting a new deal. He added that it was evident that the current strategy wasn't working very well. The protests, which followed another demonstration on Friday night, erupted after an official from the Israeli Defense Force revealed Saturday that the hostages had a stick with a white cloth on it before they were killed. The hostages were believed to have either been abandoned or escaped Hamas captivity, the official said, adding that a soldier felt threatened and opened fire. Two are killed immediately, one is injured and runs back into the building, the official said. He added that a cry for help had been heard in Hebrew, but after the battalion commander issued a ceasefire order, there was another burst of fire, and he also dies. It's funny how people just spontaneously die when the IDF launches missiles or shoots bullets. Most people are killed by bullets. They just die out of fear, I suppose. Out of fear of Israeli justice. A preliminary investigation has been launched at the highest level, adding that the conduct went against their rules of engagement. So here's the thing. This is being treated as a terrible, terrible thing because these were hostages. Here's the subtext.
Hetman, how can watch the stream I've put up on Discord to catch up? Are you not hearing him through that?
No, I'm not. One moment.
I can hear Sunday. Can you hear Sunday?
I cannot hear Sunday.
Yeah, it's in the Discord studio box.
Hold on.
Computers are the future.
I know. No, I'm very embarrassed right now. Oh, here we go. Okay.
There you go.
If you're a Palestinian, you're a Gazan, and you're a civilian, and you wave a white flag to signify that you're not a hostile, they're gonna murder you. That's what that means. Like, universal symbol.
When you want to comment, let me know, and I will pause the thing, and we'll catch up.
Of surrender is a white flag. Okay, you actually cannot surrender to the IDF because they see that and they're like, oh look, that's the weak point. You target that to kill the boss. It's unreal. Like you can't. It's like a parody. It's like that Simpsons episode where there's like those Civil War reenactors. You know, the 9th Bearded Legion were sunning and fluffing their beards in the sun. Come on, men, their white flags are no match for our muskets. They bravely slaughtered their enemies as they prayed for mercy. Like, this is going to be one of those things that students and teachers uneasily laugh at in elementary school like 100 years from now. Like, unbelievable. And of course the reason is because they don't actually care about the hostages. This is about getting Arabs the fuck out of Gaza because they hate them. Yeah, so anyways, apropos this, our favorite recent divorcee genocide apologist had debated chunky yogurt tonight, so we're going to see that.
So he's referring to the streamer Destiny and the Sankt Unger from the Young Turks, just in case anyone is unaware.
I was going to do the Ben Morris conversation. Ben Morris, by the way, is a psychotic hack, but I was going to do the Ben Morris conversation because that's funny by itself. Okay, Destiny was so embarrassed by publicizing his total ignorance about the Israel-Palestine issue while taking a pro-genocide stance, like overtly a pro-genocide stance. He actually, I'm given to understand, someone can correct me on this, I'm given to understand he actually paid Ben Morris to come on to talk with him because he's what do they call it? One of the new historians. He's somebody who started off with a fairly critical eye on the Palestinian Israel, the Israel-Palestine issue, and then seems to have sold out halfway through, and now he's basically a full-on propagandist and a utter smear merchant. It's funny actually. We'll go over his review of Khalidi's book soon because he demonstrates almost a total lack of knowledge of its contents, but he also just slanders the guy. So we're gonna have a day of Benny. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna have a couple streams where we do what we did with Thomas Bogardus. We're just gonna unbuild Benny Morris, and it's gonna be fun. Thank you, Insomniar, for the $20. No DGG, please, and thank you. The headache I've had all weekend will not tolerate it. Well, you know what to do. You know what to do if you can't stand the drama. You do exactly what you've been doing, and you feed the theory squid. By the way, for those of you who are new here, this is how this works. You see the theory squid in the corner here. It is a good squid, but a hungry squid. If I get $100 in super chats, that squid is fed. If that squid is fed, you will see in the chat, there is a poll. There is a poll with 4 theory options. If that squid gets fed, we skip whatever we're doing, and we go to an hour of theory.
Okay, speak then. Unmute yourself and talk. Hetman. Okay, could speak. Come on, man. You gotta help me out here. Hello? If you're speaking, we cannot hear you.
Okay, what about now?
Yes, now I can hear you.
All right, to be clear, he's talking about the shooting of the 3 hostages, correct?
Yes.
And okay, all right.
What's your objection?
So how much, like, I mean, besides from some of the politicians, some of the fringe politicians, evidence do we have? I mean, we have a ton of violence going on there right now. We have horrible war crimes being committed, mainly with aerial bombardment, which we talked about. But how much evidence do we have right now to suggest that an ethnic cleansing is planned and future Jewish settlement in the Gaza Strip is planned? I've heard only fringe sort of politicians mentioning that. No evidence of actual planning to do that. To me, it looks like both the government and the military are pursuing a very, very like a similar in the way of the Iraq war, where you have no real actual plan. You know, their goal is very clear. It's to eliminate Hamas. It's to do that by whatever means and with all means at their disposal. But you know, I don't, outside of those fringe and, like, you know, right politicians, really see much evidence of a plan to settle Gaza.
Well, that first part I'll say is there obviously is a plan to settle Gaza, at least a desire to, by the settlers groups themselves, who are forming are having meetings and forming plans to do so. Whether or not the Israeli government is at any stage of allowing them to, hasn't been set. But there has been very clear movement by the settlers groups in the last several days about settling Gaza.
Oh, well, yeah, that's without a doubt. And I mean, those people are absolutely.
But like, I don't think you can call them fringe either, because functionally they're the ones.
I don't know if you'd call them fringe. They are a powerful bloc.
Yes, they got the Golan Heights and the West Bank settled. They're in the Jordan Valley. They're incredibly powerful, and probably very capable of carrying out their desires. So I'm not sure we can say there's no evidence of it. Is there a direct
in that regard, you would be correct.
Maybe is there a direct piece of paper I can point to? No, but like the motion of the far right government of Israel and the groups that want to settle the occupied territories is in that direction. If I think a legitimate criticism of Sunday can be made in this regard is that we don't have evidence. We don't have larger evidence of Israel not accepting surrenders. In all likelihood,
that's also what I was just going to say. Like, he made a very blanket statement on that, and you know, I was thinking about all of in the wars that they fought. I can maybe outside of 48, hardly come up with like you know, instances where they captured soldiers of another side, or even usually, like, you know, in regards to Hamas fighters, usually they're more valuable to them alive for the intelligence that they can get from them.
And we obviously have evidence of Israel capturing people in this conflict just last week. So I'm not sure I would pull that statement and say that was good. I don't think it's unequivocal. I think if I pressed on it, I'd probably clarify that this incident sends that message.
Of course, yeah,
that's what it does. The issue.
You've heard of the.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Okay.
The issue.
You've heard of the.
No,
you've heard of the Entebbe. Yeah. Okay. You've heard of the Entebbe raid, right?
Yes.
The yeah, everybody knows about it. It's kind of one of the shining examples of the Israeli special forces and hostage rescue. They killed 3 hostages during that raid. You know, which otherwise went off very smoothly. So hostages getting killed by a rescue force isn't that uncommon. I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's it happens quite commonly, and I think you know this.
But this is not that. This what happened.
How did it happen?
Yes, that's the important part. This is not that. So 2 men are running towards Israeli soldiers, yelling Hebrew, waving white cloth on sticks. They are pulling open their clothes to show that they don't have bombs. The Israelis take shots 200 meters out and drop them. The 3rd guy goes into a building. There's an order given to cease fire, and a 2nd squad goes into the building after the 3rd guy. They turn around and drop that guy. This is very clearly a case of, at the very minimum, negligence.
Oh, without a doubt. I would actually call it incompetence too. It would be really interesting, and I'm sure that the soldiers who did it will be held accountable. I'm 100% sure of that. There's already anger and protests about it. So
yes, but the problem there's two problems with this. Whether they'll be held accountable or not is comes down from their chain of command. We won't know that for a couple days at best, if anything. The first problem I have is this is, I think, excellent evidence that this is not the Israeli army of 67 or 76.
Yeah.
I don't think they deserve the reputation they have any longer. This is ill-disciplined at best, is the best way to describe it. And it's a very clear set of circumstance. And it's one of the things, you look on Twitter and people are justifying this by saying, oh, fog of war, blah, 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 blah. But that's the point. That's the reason why surrendering, you are in danger when someone is surrendering to you, is that you don't know what's going to happen if they're actually genuinely surrendering. And you have to take precautions around that. Those precautions do not involve executing the people who are surrendering without good cause.
Of course.
It's one of the better ways of getting yourself killed is being an EPW searcher. So this also fits into that problem there. And then there's a broader behavioral issue that we have noticed with the IDF in this conflict that they've been taping. They've been incredibly bloodthirsty in some public posts. There was that video of the Israeli soldier who was going through a Gazan's shop and breaking things, not because it was Hamas wasn't hiding in the bubbles. He was just breaking them to hate and to inconvenience a Gazan, who may or may not even be alive at this point. So, of course, yeah. And then you take into account the article I sent you from the Israeli e-zine about how they're doing targeting and whatnot, and you have a very disturbing picture being painted. That's just, of course, yeah, not good, in any real sense. You have a issue too where the army is there's very few helmet cams coming out now from the IDF. They're really censoring what they're letting soldiers post. They're much more controlling than how they used to be with it, which is very concerning. Again, I don't think we're going to know a whole lot until an investigation begins of this incident. Here's the thing: we need investigations now, and we're running past the viability. No, absolutely. And I believe because they are Israeli hostages that were killed, and with the public backlash, you got to remember that even now,
The government, even after October 7th, in fact, it actually might have made his position worse, believe it or not. Netanyahu's government is not popular. People there were angry at Gaza generally after the attack, but they are not happy with that. Especially a lot of the families of victims and hostages. They are not pro Netanyahu at all. So things like this, there's already calls, like there's already some big protests going on over it and like anger towards it, public anger. I don't think he's going to survive this war. I mean, not like physically, but his politically, I think he will not. For a variety of reasons, just sort of similar as to how Golda Meir did not survive.
Yes.
73. At the same time, though, you're dealing with two different people. Golda Meir actually wasn't guilty for a lot of the failure of that, whereas Netanyahu's directly responsible in many ways to the events which occurred.
Well, I think there's a big difference now, Israel now and Israel then.
In 73, yeah.
First of all, 67 was devastating to the Israeli left. It basically obliterated it as a political entity in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
For the last 30, 40 years now, anyone who has held the prime ministership of Israel has either been in Likud, or Benjamin Netanyahu himself, or from a party that's branched off of Likud. They've had a near total victory of the Israeli right in politics. They've moved away from their welfare state. They've advanced dramatically towards being a far-right dictatorship, especially under Netanyahu, these last 2 terms. Are you doing cocaine? Is that it? Did you not share?
No, I'm sorry about that.
No, I'm just giving a hard time now.
Yeah.
No, and they've moved dramatically towards it, a far-right government. But they've also become a lot less effective. Israel hasn't fought a major war with an outside power since Lebanon in the 80s.
Yeah, with Syria arguably, but
they've effectively become a police force in a lot of ways for the West Bank, especially. There's not a lot of combat experience there in the way that there used to be. It's just not the same army. I don't think they are equipped with the right mindset to do what they want to do in destroying Hamas. Because if they were, they would know that they're not going to destroy Hamas. They're going to temporarily inconvenience Hamas, who will be back in 2 years.
It really depends. I mean, I think that they're going to end up controlling Gaza.
I think so.
Militarily. That's maybe what's going to happen.
I think they'll end up controlling the surface of Gaza, for sure. But I don't think that's going to translate into control of the tunnel system. I think Hamas will be capable of fighting Israel from Gaza for some time.
They're going to face a big insurgency. I mean, if they occupy Gaza, that's clear.
What are the odds that in a year's time we'll be calling this the third Intifada? Is I think the question to ask. And there's a second problem to this, is that it's farcical to pretend that Israel is going to defeat Hamas. They all they can do is fight each other and wound one another. It's farcical to pretend that someone is doing that. So that naturally asks the question: is Israel that stupid? Like, they clearly have to know what the end game here is going to look like. They can't think that the same people they've been tackling with for 20 years, or 24 years at this point, since the Second Intifada, are not going to what they're capable of. Like, they have to understand this.
I think that look, I think it's possible for them to it's possible for them to win that war It would be incredibly costly. The likelihood of it happening is very slim, but I think it is possible for them to win a counterinsurgency. But for them to win, their main issue, what they've already done to I think in many ways they've already lost, and what they've done, what they are continuing to do is traumatize that population that was already very traumatized. I mean, they've put it to a whole new level. I think when there's actually a fact finding, when actually some real statistics come out on this, it wouldn't surprise me if everyone in the Gaza Strip has someone that they lost or knows someone that died. What has actually been alarming to me, even at the beginning, and I repressed it a lot with my anger, I'm really guilty of that. But when I started hearing, from interviews with some of the people fleeing, or in the hospitals, about how their entire family died, like maybe 2 people out of a family of 7, because they have large families there, survived. That doesn't bode well. It really, really doesn't. And every thing that I'm watching where they're interviewing just civilians, just people who are fleeing south, they're saying that. It tells me that the situation is really bad.
Yes, absolutely. But here's the thing, like, based on the assumption that Israel has a good working knowledge of what Hamas is about, I don't think necessarily that making the argument that Israel has an ulterior motive here is out of the question. They're obviously not necessarily going to say it outright, although some politicians are clearly saying it outright, that this is the plan. But, like, isn't it?
There's also, I mean, it's a draconian strategy. It's been used by many, empires throughout history, but, well, I don't have to tell you, but like
almost
settling, there's a strategic advantage to settling your own group into places that you have, started to occupy. There's an advantage to that.
Yes, absolutely, which is why it's illegal.
Of course.
Because it's also it's also, if not an act of genocide, a crime against humanity.
Yeah, it is. It 100% is.
And there's part of that problem, again, is in kind of quantifying what's going on, because Israel very clearly is doing this, not necessarily in Gaza where they withdrew the settlements, but in the West Bank for sure. Like, people are still getting shot in the West Bank every day. That's still happening. All in the background of this. The problem I have, especially as I've been looking into it more for the video essay I'm working on for this, is that it feels to me like Israel has never dealt fairly with Palestine. In any real sense, they've never given them an option that makes a peace possible. And they are the only ones in position to dictate terms. So taking Camp David and Taba, for example, Israel offers a land swaps, but like they offer desert land outside of Gaza in exchange for arable land in the West Bank, or control of the Jordan Valley, the ability to control the Palestinian airspace, a demilitarized Palestine, so that any state that Palestine has is not a state, and that it is dependent utterly on Israel. And if I am a Palestinian negotiator, right, why should I believe that in the event of, say, an invasion from another country, where Israel and Palestine are invaded, not out of the question, right? Why should I believe that a demilitarized Palestinian state will be defended by the IDF?
I mean, that's a whole another question to tackle. I mean, we're kind of in a point far beyond the Camp David agreements.
Sort of. But looking at the
But
peace,
no,
but looking at the peace process afterwards, like any of the negotiations afterwards, is none of the deals have been nearly as comprehensive, and they've all basically been the same. Israel hasn't moved from its terms. So, like, let's
on the end, look at it this way too. On the Palestinian side, any moderate Palestinian politician who wants to, accept some agreement that, doesn't. I mean, if you got to look at actually the opinion of the population, you're dealing with essentially a refugee population in its entirety. That's what it is. With the exception of those of Israeli Arabs, I guess, who have, to varying degrees integrated into Israeli society, which they do exist. There is a large population of them.
absolutely.
But if we're talking about,
a different issue. That's like
that's a
not
whole different one.
connected to the
But
Palestinian issue.
yeah, it's not. But if we're talking about the population, the overwhelming view is, the destruction of the Israeli state and the restoration of, it's less of a two-state of what they have now than what they had before. And that is where you run into issues, because if you are a Palestinian politician who is advocating for some kind of moderate middle stance, how are you going to gain a support base? There's no way.
You're not, which is why
I think
I don't believe in the two-state solution, to be perfectly frank. I don't think it's going to work.
That's one issue with
there's
it.
not enough Palestinian territory available. Even if Palestine gets all of the West Bank and all of Gaza, they don't have an economy. So they're going to be dependent upon Israel anyway. So even if the best possible deal lands on the lap of Mohammed Abbas right today, it still isn't viable. So my ultimate point, and this is where I become a horrible person. Israel doesn't have to be a Jewish state; it can be a state.
And yeah, I know, but that's I agree with you, and it would be great if there was like an identity to develop from. You could argue that some of that has happened with the Israeli Arab population, but
yeah, but that's not the Israeli Arab and the Israeli Christian population are not nearly large enough to factor in as a coherent political bloc. You would be creating in a single state solution. You would effectively be creating a bloc that can run counter to the Orthodox and the far right Israeli, the Orthodox Jewish tradition and the far right Israeli parliament. You would overnight build a whole new political bloc. No one would say that a single state solution would be easy or that it wouldn't be incredibly taxing to Israel as a nation. But
it wouldn't be. I'm going to tell you something flat out that I think it's impossible, and I think the goal. It's not even. I know that the goal of the Israel.
You've cut out. Uh-oh. Try plugging your microphone back in. All right, while you do that, I'm going to see where we're at here.
Or if it's in the middle of something important, Israel.
Oh, God, it's this.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Oh, yeah. Good stuff.
Also, Destiny.
يدعون انهم يخدمون القضيه الفلسطينيه.
Bashar al-Assad, is that this guy?
All right,
القضيه الفلسطينيه.
No.
Hetman will be back shortly. He is rebooting his laptop for some reason.
Fuck, wait, who is this? Who are these people? Fuck, am I just supposed to...
Hang on, we'll use this one. This is better.
He must be a fucking
You don't
loser.
know Francisco Franco?
He's got $2 supporters. I don't know who Francisco Franco is, but he must be a fucking
You
loser.
don't know Francisco Franco?
Francisco. That's such a Destiny moment. Francisco Franco, he sounds like a fucking loser. Jesus.
No.
He's got $2 supporters.
Bruh.
$2 supporters.
يخدمون القضية
Bashar al-Assad, is that this guy?
الفلسطينية والقضية الفلسطينية
No.
الأولى عندهم.
Fuck, wait, who is this? Who are these people? Fuck, am I just supposed to...
Destiny
losers.
shouldn't be a
President of Turkey, Prime Minister of Turkey, fucking loser.
Destiny shouldn't be
Dictator.
streamed. Just Jesus. Holy shit.
Sorry, President of Israel. Let's say Prime Minister. Aragon, the President of Israel. Aragorn, warlord of Palestine. Yes. Middle East, that's from Lord of the Rings, right?
That made those things possible. Who's to say? But if peace is ever going to happen here, and like the apartheid conditions, as we would say,
The best part is he tried to pronounce it correctly. Erdogan.
To an end, it has to start with Palestinians ceasing things like endless rockets and terrorist attacks, or endorsements of rockets and terrorist attacks.
It's like when Vosh pronounces Bolivia. It's weird. I hate it when people do that. It's like they don't pronounce it correctly. They just say it with an accent. It's like the Quran or the or what's another one? I remember like William Lane Craig used to do that. He would refer to the Quran, and it's like it's technically correct, but it's weird to say that when you're clearly saying it in English. It's like you're imitating the accent and not just the.
Come to Red Lobster for endless
rules about it.
shrimp and rockets.
Paris, yeah, that's another one. Yeah, it's kind of like it's like if I was talking about like Canadian provinces, and suddenly I said,
Okay, you're live again?
Yeah, I'm live. Sorry about that, people. Yeah, some really, really bad technological issues today.
What is a technological issue that you had neglected computer learning for 30 years?
Yeah, you might as well say that. Back to where we began, where we left off. Sorry.
Yes, Israel.
So,
the plan of Israel is, and then you cut out.
Yeah, it's there's no intention and no benefit for the Israeli state to abandon this sort of convoluted policy in regards to the Palestinians that is, keeping them perpetually stateless. Because if they were to implement, I don't see in our lifetimes there being a South Africa moment for the Israelis and for, Israel Palestine. I do not see that at all.
Well,
because the main issue is that
either. Like, this has to be imposed upon them if it's going to happen. So, like, the ultimate answer is unless the United States gets behind it, it's not going to happen.
And even then, I could see them struggling until the end. I mean,
it's a 50-50 chance that they start shooting at us, which means and it's incredibly unlikely at the moment. Although I think the cloud is starting to lift that American politicians are going to turn against Israel. Because Israel, like I said before, has no real strategic benefit to the United States. It has enormous political benefit in the fact that we have lobbies advancing Israeli causes.
It's not just for lobbies. I mean, you have big lobbies. It's not just the Jewish American lobby. It's the evangelical Christian lobby.
That too.
That's a big one.
That's a messed up relationship on its own. But let's be honest. Though, if there is no viable two-state solution and there's no chance of a one-state solution, then this ends one way. This ends with Israel committing a genocide of the Palestinians. A slow one, to be sure, but a genocide nevertheless.
I know that's the big
That's
fear.
that's the inevitable
the
end.
inevitable end of a conflict like this. I think there is another solution, and it's something that I remember having this conversation with, of all people, my ethnic Syrian sleep doctor. And he's very intelligent and loves to talk to me about politics when I come in. It's interesting. He's actually pro-Assad. He's comes from a half Sunni, half Christian background, so he comes from somewhat of a cosmopolitan background. And of course, being in the medical field, he has tons of Jewish friends and colleagues. And what he tells them is, he's like, if I were the Israeli government, I would have been pumping tons of money into Gaza and into the West Bank, like into Palestinian like moderate groups and things like that. Like that is one thing that they haven't done. I think that has to do a lot with like the failure of it. It says a lot about, I think, Israeli culture, and also its political divisions. But that would make a huge amount of sense. And if you were to do that, you would, I think, start to see changes. Actually, if you did a policy like that, could actually make it
would undercut Hamas at the very least.
It would undercut Hamas, but it would also alleviate issues that they have, and slowly but surely, it would almost be kind of like they could make a two-state or one-state solution without it being a threat to Jewish dominance within Israel. I think that, if they actually did that, if they actually focused on bettering the situation of Palestinians, the economic situation, that could yield results. The issue is that probably should have been done. Oh God. Even 3 decades ago is too late, too little, I think. Yeah, but even if you started like 3 decades ago, or even like say after the removal of settlers from Gaza, you could have seen some results from that.
You know what they
I really do believe that.
You know, they should have done it after the Oslo Accords were signed in the 90s, which is about 3 decades ago now, because there was a dissonance in the territories, Palestinian territories, about how the Oslo Accords were presented and how they actually went down. That might not have been so acute had the Israelis been doing something like that. So what happens is the Oslo II gets signed, and then nothing happens. Camp David goes off, and because Bill Clinton just decided on a lark, he wanted to try to solve Middle Eastern peace in the last a couple months of his tenure as president, and he just didn't do it well. Camp David explodes. The Intifada starts. They meet at Talba, which doesn't really accomplish much either in the grand scheme of things, and the Intifada continues for 4 years. And
Intifada. Go ahead.
They done that at Oslo, the time the Oslo Accords were signed, they might have cut Hamas's legs out from underneath it, and the Intifada would have been, if not happening, smaller than it did.
I 100% agree with you. I also think too, though, on the Palestinian side, armed resistance, and actually to the degree of what has been happening, has been counterproductive to them as well. It's really just, if anything, worsened their plight.
At the minimum, it accomplishes nothing. Here's the thing: Israel is basically one of those bing bong things that flip. You knock it over and it comes back up, because they receive an absurd amount of defense money from the United States. So it's not practical for Israel to fall so long as the United States exists.
I don't think Israel would even if the United States would, at this point, if the Israel is by far not,
Israel is viable as a country now, on its own, without American support.
Completely.
However, this is not true in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
No, not at all. Yeah, 100%. But now,
And
I
that's
mean,
I think that's kind of the high watermark for fatwa and the Fedayeen is the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Like once Black September hits, they're functionally done. But like it's the thing about it is now Israel is a weird like one of the things I've been consulting is CIA fact book for Gaza, for the West Bank, and for Israel generally.
mhm.
This is one of the things I noticed as I looked over the economic information for Israel. And I separated it from the West Bank and Gaza in particular because they are different issues. Israel's principal economic inputs or outputs are tech industry, right? High tech.
Yeah.
This is they're the second biggest tech industry in the Western world, next to Silicon Valley. That was only possible due to a considerable amount of outside investment. Israel is a net importer of virtually anything they need because they don't have a lot of natural resources, and Gaza has even less, and West Bank has even less. Which is why I say that a two-state solution doesn't leave Palestine with a viable economic plan. There's not enough arable farmland, even if they get the whole West Bank.
What about, so here's an idea, and it's something that I thought about, but like a federated state solution, like, you know, where you basically have them there, and say it were to follow a model like I suggested, where you have a semi-integrated economy, maybe even fully integrated economy with, you know, considerable Israeli investment. Like, you know, there's no reason why the West Bank and Gaza couldn't have, you know, a thriving tech industry as well, especially if Israel helps lift it up about, like up, you know,
No,
like
there
above the
isn't.
ground. I think too, another issue, and this is something some people might take, I don't think anyone in our channel would take offense with, but there needs to be almost like Turkey style, you know, like Mustafa Kemal style secularization of Palestine. And that would be exceedingly difficult to do.
Yeah,
but in order for them to progress, that would be needed as well.
You can't do
That's
that
simply the truth.
without secularizing Israel as a whole.
I mean, Israel kind of needs a little bit of that too, but the vast majority,
they desperately do. But the Zionist ideal is very attached to an ethno state.
It's an ethno state, and it's actually not so much in a religious state as it is an ethno state. The conservative religious element in Israel, particularly not conservative, like the ultra orthodox sway on politics has grown, but by and large, it is a secular state.
Yeah, like there's a big block,
but it is very much an ethno state
of ultra orthodox power in Israel. But like the vast majority of it is just plain old far right ultra nationalism. Really,
I would also tell you though that the vast majority of that ultra nationalism, at least nowadays, back in the day, not the case. I mean, during the formation of it. But actually, the first rightist Zionists, like the founders of right-wing Zionism, so people like Vladimir Jabotinsky,
Theodore Herzl.
Herzl's not a rightist, and
he's pretty damn right-wing.
He was, but you're talking about like I mean, he predates people like Jabotinsky and
yeah.
You got to read about Jabotinsky. Actually, he is very interesting for a variety of reasons. I'm mostly interested in him due to his opinions on because he grew up in the Russian Empire and from Odessa in Ukraine, and he actually had some very interesting takes on you know, ethno-nationalism. He was one of the first people to sort of recognize Ukrainians as a growing, you know, national group, and he thought that they needed to be, he actually predicted that they would become like a, you know, that the Ukrainian language and culture would become like preeminent within that region. But he also, I mean, he's the founder of right-wing Zionism, and he's very interesting, both on the Palestine issue and on many other things. He died before there was an independent Israel, but
When did when did he die?
39. Yeah, he
not much more before.
Not much more, but
like plans were in motion at that point. Like, did he have something to do with the buyouts and the territory swaps that were happening?
Oh, absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. He had to do with that. He had a lot to do with the foundation of the I don't know if it's the
like
no, not the Palma. He had a lot to do with the what are we doing here? Oh,
what are we doing? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just seeing where we're at. Sorry.
Yeah, it's
he had a lot to do with this.
He had a lot to do with the formation of the Haganah, the like basically what would become the Israeli military. And he's actually, you got to understand, he's a person of that time period of the 30s. Some would call him a proto-fascist, or like a person with like actual fascist ideals in his thought. But he's very interesting. He's one of my historical, I wouldn't say like I have historical heroes, but he's someone that I find very interesting. You need to read about him if you want to understand right-wing Zionism.
Send me what book?
I'll send you a ton of articles on him and some book references.
The thing about it is, to get to the proto-fascist point, I don't think I would call Israel fascist. Not least in the same sense. Like,
right-wing Zionism was highly influenced by fascist thought of the day,
but
and
so
actually
were a lot of people. So were a lot of people. That doesn't necessarily make them fascist. For example, like Schmidt,
if you could call
Schmidt is clearly a Nazi, but he also has very obvious thought, like input into Zionism. So, like, I'm not sure, like that doesn't in and of itself make them fascists. The other thing I point out is people can be bad without being fascist.
They can be bad without being fascist, but I would describe some of the elements within the right-wing Zionist groups, like for example, like some of the like the Stern Gang, God, why is it escaping? Why is it escaping me now? One of the Menachem Begin was a part of the group. Ergun. Yeah. Okay, so you have people within those organizations. I mean, like this Avram Stern, who is rather stupidly, but actually reaching out to Nazi leaders at the beginning of World War II to form a bloc there that can fight against the British. I mean, you have people like that. You have people that are, had the Nazis somehow not been, had that not been the main, part of their ideology, anti-Semitism. I mean, like actually, even if they looked at things like how, other fascist groups did, they could have easily set up, if they wanted to, a puppet state there. They could have even, actually, Avram Stern was even saying, we'll take all the Jews in Europe, and we'll help you fight the British. So, I mean, there is that element there. And I wouldn't call Avram Stern anything but a fascist. I mean, he certainly is.
There's a certain problem with the definition of fascism too.
Fascism is not the same as Nazism, by the way. They're two separate definitions. But
there's parallels to run. Like there's parallels that I see that run in Zionism, that run in like American nativism, as evidenced by the Second Ku Klux Klan, for example. It runs in Nazism, runs in Italian fascism, runs in Spanish fascism. Is this concept of nationalism being like core and essentialized by the group? So, and the backbone of the Jewish ethnostate is this nationalist sentiment that develops through Zionism.
It does.
So, like, that's very similar
Yeah.
to fascism, but it's not quite the same thing. It doesn't come with necessarily the same things. It comes with bad things, to be sure, especially if you're Palestinian. But, like, I would hesitate to call them fascist from a purely intellectual standpoint.
I think that, and this is getting a bit off topic, but I think that the formation of Israel or a Jewish state was an inevitability, especially maybe not before the Holocaust, but after the Holocaust for sure, without a question.
I'm not sure. That's
and
a good
if you
thing.
call if the definition of Zionism is, the advocation of a Jewish state, you could call me definitely, by that narrow definition, a Zionist.
Well, first of all, it's a broad definition. Second of all,
by that broad, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. When I say that Israel doesn't necessarily have to be Jewish, my problem isn't with the concept of people living there. My problem is with what comes from it. So, my issue isn't that there shouldn't be Jewish people living in peace and harmony and happiness. They should. But by the same token, I say the same thing about the Palestinians.
Yeah, and I get what you mean, but you got to understand it this way too. You have a society, the society that forms it, that is, even before the Holocaust, a widely persecuted. That's minimal. That's like at minimum widely persecuted. Basically, Jews are the most hated. They're the most hated group on the planet, arguably. And there's so many people who want to destroy them. So if you try to do a one-state solution, and say you have an ethnic majority, the issue with Israel now is outside of the Orthodox population, you don't have the same level of birth rate in secular Israeli society that you do with, Arab populations, particularly the Muslim Arab populations. I don't think that a one-state solution is a recipe for success either. I think, too, if military power is handed over to them, if there's no way they're going to share it, because survival of Jewish people, to a large extent, hinders on. God, what am I trying to? It hinders on military power within the Israeli state, within of Jews within that state, and they're not going to get let go of that. They know what happens when they do. There would have to be some guarantee, like some security guarantee.
Yes, because that worked so very well for Ukraine.
Obviously it worked well, but
I feel like that argument centers on Israel being the only safe place for Jews, and so Biden gets up and says that this past week, and I'm not sure that's a valid argument anymore. Certainly it is when Herzl is alive, for sure, and throughout the early half of the last century.
I don't think I don't think France is a safe place for the Jews. I don't think much of Europe. Oddly, I think Ukraine is one of the first times in its history, one of the safest places to be Jewish in Europe. That's makes me very happy, but it's also very ironic.
I think the difficulty is obviously Donald Trump winning would probably not be great for that situation. But absent that, there's not going to be, absent a successful right-wing Republican takeover.
The United States has been a very safe place for Jews, and I can attest to that.
And Canada.
Canada too, but it's not completely safe.
No, but neither is Israel.
It's safer. Neither is Israel, yeah. But at the end of the day,
You're probably better off as a Jew in the United States than you are in Israel. At least you're not getting shot at.
not on
rockets.
a college not on a college campus. That's
Except
for
I
sure,
haven't
but,
seen anything. I haven't seen anything substantial about the college campuses that hasn't been fairly typical of anything else, other conflict that happens.
True. But things like that
haven't been dangerous. What they have been is uncomfortable, and people have been
like
trying to make political hay out of that.
Let me make another argument, though. Germany was a very safe place for Jews for a very long time. I mean, there's fluctuations in that safety. I mean, have the Crusades, which makes a huge portion of them flee eastward. That becomes basically the population, one of the population sources of the Eastern, Ashkenazi Jewry. But I mean, leading up to Hitler's rise, Germany was one of the safer places, and you had the most assimilated Jewish community in all of Europe in Germany. I mean, really, you did, to the point where it was disappearing to some extent, in Hungary too. Things like that can change. And anti-Semitism is a very, very, very dangerous ideology. I would argue that in terms of hateful ideologies, it's it's one of the most persistent, pervasive, and powerful ones.
Well, its persistence is kind of due to the length of time that Judaism has existed.
Yes, and that's why I am not 100% convinced that the United States is truly safe for Jews, because all it takes is for someone, and it's ironic, Trump isn't necessarily as bad as he is, although he empowered the people that hated him. Look, I mean, his daughter converted to Judaism. She's married to a Jew. And I'm not sticking up for Trump here. There are people worse than him, and they are what is behind, they are the people that will follow him. And I mean, look at what happened to 23. Yeah, but look at what happened to recently. I don't know if you've heard of the hacking scandal that happened with the genetic database 23andMe.
Yes.
Yeah, they leaked all the information of Ashkenazi Jewish Americans, basically the people who have those genetic markers. That's fucked up. That exists. As we go further into the future, what's to stop someone? I mean, granted, I'm not a scientist by any means. What's to stop someone from engineering, say, a nanovirus from targeting people with those markers? I mean, that could happen anywhere else.
Oh, yeah, that's actually an episode of Fringe, by the way. Well, kind of, sort of, but that's beside the point. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing, though. From a standpoint of protecting minorities and ethnic groups, there is very little reason at this moment, because the threat base is called, the call from the United States is coming from inside the House, obviously, and it's far-right Republicans, and there are more and more of them in power all the time. There is no, so the Jewish struggle for safety is just as relevant and interconnected with the trans and the rest of the LGBTQ movement and disabled persons and basically.
Oh God! Don't lump the Jewish struggle in with all. I mean, that for that maybe
for a practical, stop. From a practical point of view, though, it makes as much sense to protect all of these groups and all of these groups to work together to protect one another because of how that system works. Because the fascists work on a last hired, first fired system. So the last group to get a substantial upgrade in civil rights gets pushed back, and they push back further and further and further. So fighting this battle is probably much more efficacious, particularly for LGBTQ rights now, is much more efficacious because that's where the target's going to be. And if they change directions, then we have the resources to put that into that fight then. So this isn't a non-interconnected fight.
All right. Well, within that same token, on the left, you have people like the Squad, like Ilhan Omar and anti-Zionist people who are borderline. They're anti-Zionists, but truly they're anti-Semites too. They might say that they're not, but they are. And to be absolutely honest with you, in some ways, I find people like that more dangerous because they've reached that point where they're in like a position of power. Whereas when you have people
You're talking about
like say
back,
like so,
you're talking about 4 Congress people who aren't committee chairs, by the way, right? That's what we're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about. Okay, but
That's going to happen more and more with
it's doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, I
The
don't know.
entire
I see it.
The last 2
Yeah.
months have seen the entire Democratic Party take a massive shuffle for the center again. Progressive, and I would definitely challenge the assertion that all 4 members are anti-Semitic. Elon Omar might be hostile towards Zionism, and I don't think though being hostile towards Zionism
With absolutely no fucking personal stake in it. I'm sorry, she's a Muslim, but that's like her only stake in it, and that's not a real stake. She's from Somalia. She doesn't have any stake in that conflict. The other woman, Rashida, I don't even know. Yeah, I mean, she's a Palestinian. I mean, I can at least see her point of view, but Elon Omar just disgusts me, honestly.
Well,
But that's besides my personal views on that.
yeah, I also don't like 6 or 4 backbencher Congress people is not necessarily the same thing as one of the people in the National Security Council, like Steve Bannon. I get that people are uncomfortable with a lot of leftists or a lot of progressives or leftists' view on Israel, but I have 2 answers to that. The first is that it's significantly easier to bring a progressive congressperson under control than a right-wing congressperson. Secondly, the vast majority of people who are being called out for this are people who are not in positions of power, of substantive power. For example, Elise Stefanik brings those college presidents on and gives them a gotcha question, and everyone is screaming about anti-Semitism on campus, when all those presidents can do is answer to their college's policies. The other thing is, I would point out that all 3 of those colleges have been enormously beneficial Jewish graduates. So I'm not sure what.
Well, they have, yeah.
I'm not sure what people are getting at there. Like there is the degree to which, by and large, you have to go out of your way to find Jewish enclaves here in the United States. They're like there's one close to you guys in the north side of Chicago, obviously. There's a couple in New York. But like a lot of people are Jewish who live perfectly integrated into the broader community. I don't think Judaism is going anywhere in the United States anytime soon. I also think that because of the unique relationship that they have as a religion to ethnicity and bloodlines, that it's incredibly difficult to kind of parse this on terms that can't feel really awful and racist sometimes. Because for most Christians, this concept of ethnic identification as religion is really weird. Really weird. Like Catholics wouldn't do that. Like that's just off the wall for them.
Yeah, you have to understand that for a Jew, it's an ethno-religious group. It's not simply
that's antithetical to most Americans' common experience with religion. Like it's
of course, but that's not the case within. I mean, it's odd because I would argue that science, in a lot of ways, is actually it's vindicated Jews and it's also vindicated anti-Semites in some ways. And I will tell you, the genetic science by what I mean. So by with what I'm talking about. So now with the advent of DNA testing, haplogroup identification, things like that, they can actually see that when they test Eastern Ashkenazi Jews that this group is not related, even though they have lived in Slavic countries or Germanic countries and European countries, they are distant genetically. We can actually look at this, we can analyze this, and there's actually data to support it that this group is genetically distinct from its Slavic neighbors or other European neighbors.
Yes, but that
For a
argument,
long time,
I think it's
like if you look at there were Jewish, believe it or not, there were when eugenics existed in the 19th and late 19th and early 20th, early to mid 20th century. Even Jews themselves, Ashkenazi Jews, like intellectual scientists, they were, once these genetic studies started to come out, they were actually quite surprised because they thought for sure that they were likely, they were questioned, like they actually, even though with like oral history, they still questioned themselves having any Levantine ancestry. They were actually quite astounded when the science came out to support that, in fact, there is some continuity there. Now, granted, there are caveats to this argument. With what we can tell now, the northern, central, eastern European Jewish population is likely descended from both a Levantine component and also local European component. So it's a mixed group that emerged very early, and then once after its emergence, it was endogamous.
I'm not entirely certain. I would be terribly surprised by that. Like, I would almost assume it to be the case. Like, the diaspora clearly is something that has happened in stages, not necessarily all at once.
No, it's stages, and also, this group originates genetically, within the Middle Ages. I mean, within like the early Middle Ages, and what they've kind of theorized too is that different population clusters emerged in different parts of Europe, and over time they intermingle with each other. I mean, that's generally how groups emerge.
Yeah, that's a pretty common way of an ethnic group emerging. Like,
but because that group,
there are no pure ethnic groups.
There's not, but because that group was so endogamous due to its circumstances and also its own internal control mechanisms.
That's a couple different things at play there. Circumstance and social
you have
pressure.
you have a very easily identifiable group in the same way that Amish are easily you can easily identify them.
Actually, it's a very similar phenomena. Not necessarily, kind of, sort of. Quakers and Amish both get a kind of nasty rap, but they never quite get.
What I am really, not to interrupt that, you got to continue with the Amish because it's fun, and Quakers. But what I'm really glad about is that none of the Nazi leadership lived to find this out, because that's very vindicating for them that this group is not. I mean,
but that's a nationalist argument.
It is, but also, I mean, like I'm looking at it in a different way. Like, then it would.
I don't think it justifies what they did.
Yeah.
Like here's the thing.
It doesn't at all. It doesn't at all. But it would vindicate the fact that they're not. They're not just a religious group. They're a race, like we said, or not a race, but an ethnicity.
But like the argument that I would make back to anyone who wants to bring this up as a topic is, so fucking what, right? Like, take me for example. I have family that comes from Luxembourg. I have family that comes from Lithuania. I have ancestry in England, France, and Germany. Like there is always been...
Me too, as an American as well.
Yeah, there's always been and I have Canadian on my mother's side, and some amount of undetermined stuff going on there. Michigan's a weird place, but let's carry on. Anyway, but like that doesn't mean that you cannot live side by side with people who come from radically different places, deep in their ancestry, in peace.
Of course.
And
I mean that doesn't mean that Israel couldn't be that way. Had it formed differently. Yeah, look at Switzerland. Israel could have actually gone down that route and been just as successful, if not more so.
I
I think
think,
Switzerland's a very good example.
yeah, probably.
You know,
All things considered, they have a very dual French and German heritage going on.
they do. Yeah.
Despite the fact that they basically sat very neutrally in the middle of Europe for thousands of years.
I mean, who's
There's
to say that?
and I get why people get mixed up in ethnicity, because there's a certain value, I think, in being able to pull from a tradition that runs back, and like it feels good, right? Like now is a great example. Chris Kingle marts in American cities. Why? Because they're fun.
Of course, yeah.
Vital to the cultural experience of America? No. But they're there. They're fun. People
That's kind
enjoy
of
it.
the Chris Kingdom marts are actually kind of the last vestige. I mean, even though the vast majority of white Americans actually report German ancestry of some sort, they're not very German. And
Two
I mean, there's
world
a lot of
wars.
historical.
Two world
Yeah, two
wars were
world
not
wars.
good for that.
No, no, no.
Uh,
I will argue though that, you know, and I mean, I can state this coming from an Italian background on my father's side. Like you don't have to go far back to like, I mean, just my dad's father, his first language was a Northern Italian dialect. So, which is actually a different language from Standard Italian, by the way. Way, way different. But like, I mean, that's there. What did we grow up? What did we do that was specifically Italian? Not very much outside of maybe we cooked risotto and some pasta and
well,
you know like
we talk a lot about the syncretisms of religion. I think there's
yeah,
cultural syncretisms to talk about too. Like there's a very distinct Italian American culture that emerged, like out of the availability of what it meant to be Italian in the America at that period of time.
for sure.
Like Italian also has a huge impact on America, our cuisine, especially, and I think that's like a very common cultural
Hmm.
interface. Is we learn about one another
Hmm.
principally by eating together and sharing meals. Like that's kind of a fairly standard social. So like when you're able to bring a distinct dish that remains popular, uh, that helps carve out a special cultural identity in a mixed society. So Italians bring a lot of food into American society. Mexico does too. German
Without
food
a
isn't
doubt, yeah.
German food isn't really that popular.
The hamburger is kind of a derivative of that, of you know, hamburger steak.
Yeah, but
But it's, I mean, it's a
very
completely different
Americanized.
thing though. It's a completely different
Like,
animal.
when is the last time someone said, "Let's go out for schnitzel"?
I mean, I do that, but
Yeah, well,
I'm
I do,
very
but
weird.
I'm part German. So, but like here's the thing.
You're part German, and you actually had a grandmother that was Lithuanian who made you schnitzel, but
Yes.
you know, which is interesting actually. She should have been making you kugelis and like
Well, my
zeppelin and
grandfather
stuff.
was that was a messed up. That was kind of a messed up dynamic of that relationship. Also, because like most of Lithuanian food is potatoes and bacon, which is fantastic, by the way, everyone. Potatoes and bacon.
Lithuanian food is not well known, but it's very good. It's essentially like
it'll kill you in about 10 years flat. Trust me.
My favorite Lithuanian dish is actually, I mean, Poles have it too. It's summer borscht. It's actually a borscht made from cold buttermilk, like kefir is what it is.
Yeah.
And then you put in beets, some eggs, and onions, sliced cucumbers, and then you serve it actually with hot roasted potatoes. It's really, really good. Yeah, but yeah, no one really knows about Lithuanian food, and I there's a good Lithuanian restaurant by me called Grand Dukes, which is not, if it was just Lithuanian, no one would eat there. It's basically pan Eastern European, and most of the wait staff there, and actually even the owner's wife is Ukrainian. So there's a lot of like former Soviet options there. I go there a lot. But the things that are distinctly Lithuanian are maybe like five things.
former
on the menu.
Soviet food. This is borscht, but it has a hunk of metal in it. It's borscht. You eat borscht or report to KGB.
I had my Armenian girlfriend's mother's borscht, and hopefully she's not listening. I think I told her, though, right after I had it, it was good. But I've had a lot of borscht in my life, living in Ukraine, also, knowing many Russians, and even my mom made a Jewish derivative of borscht, which is actually without the beets. It's a sweet and sour cabbage soup. But yeah, it was a bit bland. So, I told her that I could actually do better, and I know I can. So we're gonna have a bit of a contest here.
That was almost an unwise decision relationship-wise, but carry on.
No. She already knows. She wanted me to be. We were honest with each other. I mean, when I've made bad food, she'll let me know.
Oh, good.
She doesn't really make bad food. She's actually. I've conceded that she's a better cook than me, and that's hard for me because I do like
who
to
turned
cook.
out to be a pretty decent cook.
Who?
I'm gonna toot my own horn here. Me.
I know your pea casserole, by the way, is something that I wanted to try out. I was gonna try it out with you told me the idea, and I was gonna try it out with my green bean casserole. The issue is that we had 2 vegetarians coming to our Friendsgiving, so I couldn't do
so
your
no
bacon.
Yeah. Here's the
And
thing.
that kind of makes it problematic to me because
a big difference.
There's a lot of the flavor. Yeah.
The biggest thing to the green bean casserole that really elevates it is the caramelized onion.
That's what I did. Yeah,
and that takes a not insignificant amount of the cook time. Like, you basically have to babysit that sucker for a while, because you don't want it to burn, and blah 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 blah. Onions got a lot of sugar, blah. But I would point out on the topic of food that there's a very distinct Jewish cuisine too. It's also fucking delicious, by the way. If you haven't had Jewish variations on recipes, go. Fantastic stuff.
Me and at that Friendsgiving, I brought my mom's beet salad, or her mother's recipe, and I would bring that beet salad to every Ukrainian event that we ever had. And it's funny because when you look at it, it's pretty similar to the Ukrainian recipe, or the regional Slavic one. But the difference with the Jewish variations is that Jews like to add either sugar or different, they like to spice things up a bit. Not necessarily spicy, but they put more seasoning in their food.
They have interesting seasoning combinations that wouldn't necessarily occur to a French trained chef.
No, not at all. If you've ever had, I'm sure you've had cabbage rolls, the Jewish style of doing cabbage rolls. So I'll tell you a difference. If you get a cabbage roll from a Ukrainian family, what they'll do is they serve it with usually tomato-based sauce. They might put some garlic, some black pepper in it, a little bit of salt, maybe some sour cream, which is, definitely makes it good. But it's a little bit bland. Now, what the Jewish recipe is similar, except for what they add is sugar and lemon juice or some sort of vinegar or citrus, and what you end up with is a sweet and sour cabbage roll. Basically, it's really good. It's much, much better, in my opinion, and I don't want to offend any of my Ukrainian friends, but it's a better version. And it's weird because, I thought maybe this originated in the United States. And what I found out just recently when my friend Misha came to our Friendsgiving, he's an older man, about my parents' age, but he grew up in Soviet Ukraine. And he said, he's told when he had my mom's beet salad, he said, "Oh, typical Jewish recipe." And then I asked him about the sweet and sour, the love of sweet and sour flavors among Jews. And he's like, "Yeah, that's how my mom made cabbage rolls. That's how my mom made borscht." What's interesting is actually the sugar aspect of it. So Jews were predominantly involved in the sugar trade in Ukraine. So they had access to sugar, and access to sugar that actually a lot of Ukrainian farmers didn't. So they were able to incorporate it in recipes a lot.
It absolutely boggles my mind, as an aside, Like, if you look at any modern American kitchen's spice cabinet, yeah, you go back 300, 400 years, and we would be, like, obscenely wealthy. Like, you eat like kings.
Oh, without a doubt.
When you consider that not inconsiderable wars were waged over spice.
Not just like spice, though, meat, the availability of
Yes.
meat. Meat is a luxury to a lot of Europe. And that's actually what separates Italian American cuisine from Italian cuisine largely. Because Italian cuisine, it's not very heavily meat based. It's very starchy, but, meat is like a separate thing. And for a long part of, Italy's existence, it's a luxury. Like, you don't eat beef. You don't eat like pork, maybe when you have the ability to slaughter one of your pigs, you can do that, but chickens you don't eat. They're valuable for the eggs.
Yes.
It's the same case in Eastern Europe as well. So when you have immigrants move to the United States, their cuisine, the cuisine that develops is really meat heavy. Like, with Jewish delis, for example, you think that a Jew living in Belarus or Ukraine, Imperial Russian Belarus or Ukraine, is going to eat a pastrami sandwich or have that type of meat like every month even. No, that's a rarity. That's a rarity for them, and it's actually a rarity for the Ukrainian population too. What's interesting is I used to, before I realized that history, I used to say to people like who were vegetarians in Ukraine, I'm like, how do you do it? And actually it was the norm for Ukrainians to have a primarily vegetarian based diet for most of the year. Because meat is a luxury. And that's also one reason why, and I think, Anthony Bourdain, God bless his soul, I am not anti-vegetarian, I am not anti-vegan, but I definitely take issue with people who travel somewhere, especially say they're like some volunteer going to a village somewhere in like, say, Central America, Africa, or like, I am catching a cold, by the way.
Everyone is.
I am not happy with that.
All right, we are alive again. Hurrah. No.
Very good.
Yeah, we're going to lose that again. Damn it. We have gone way off course tonight, haven't we? We're just chatting at this point.
We were supposed to have a war of Rome Total War. I am not necessarily actually, with my cold developing, I'm kind of a bit reluctant to do it. But I am free tomorrow, people, followers, subscribers. Me and Daedalus definitely have to narrow down a time, but I am free until Thursday of this week.
I have a meeting. Let's try to pick something. Because also I'm trying to push through playing Ultimate Civil War General for everyone.
You know that the fate has saved me from a horrible defeat.
No, it's postponed your defeat.
It's postponed it, but I'm gonna actually use this time to practice a
How
bit,
about
at least
tomorrow,
against the computer.
instead of doing the thing, we actually do a practice game.
That's fine. I'm totally
answer my
up
damn
for that.
message when I send it to you. Damn it.
Yeah, yesterday was sorry about that. We had a kids full day yesterday. We had 2 birthday parties to take them to. So
that's when you put whiskey in the sippy cup.
Oh, no. I mean, if that sippy cup's for me, definitely, but being the driver, I couldn't do that.
Fair enough.
Anyway, that was a really good. It wasn't the intent, but I think we had our best Israel-Palestine discussion in the history of the show.
We've had a significantly better Israel-Palestine discussion than most people in this space. Holy shit! I can't do it anymore. I'm losing my ability to function with these people.
I'm honestly, I really. The conflict is I follow it, but it has devolved into such a unfolding atrocity that it's really hard on me. I mean, it's hard on me now even more so you know,
This-
I approached it like, you know, since the 7th when it started, I was really hit by that. But now I'm like, you know, when I'm seeing what's happening, I'm disgusted. I'm
I
disgusted
I
that
I don't feel the same way. I don't think what happened on the 7th was okay. I'm not saying you did, but like I don't see what's happening on the 7th is okay. But it wasn't unwarranted. That's the problem I have. Is ultimately Hamas attacking. They have grounds to fight. They don't have grounds to do what they did, but they have grounds to fight. Like they have a
Yeah.
legitimate problem with Israel, that a legitimate claim to a problem.
no, without a doubt. I do not disagree with you there.
What I just feel is exhausted because these are two peoples who share such a massive common history. Who
They do, yeah.
in a lot of ways they have more in common than they have apart. And
What's interesting too is that they have, I might be wrong with the science. I'd have to read some genetic studies, especially recent ones. But as far as I know, even, and I'm not just talking about the Israeli, like the Mizrahi Jews, which are the, you know, Jews from the Arab
anyone
countries.
not from Eastern Europe, anyone in the
but
Middle
even
East, basically,
from what I
or
know,
Africa.
Eastern European Jews have more in common genetically with Palestinians than they do with their European neighbors from whatever country they came from. I might be wrong. The science might have, there might be new studies that have, you know, disproved that. But, and that's the weird thing is because phenotypically they don't look similar. I mean, at all.
Well,
East European Jewry looks very, I mean, in some cases, like in many cases, very European. And that's also one aspect as to why Zionism is so, like, you know, people related to a colonization, like a white colonization, because you have basically white Europeans coming to, you know, take over land that, you know, they have kind of a tenuous, you know, or
the thing is, the
like,
problem
you know,
is that neither the Palestinians nor the Israelis are tenuously connected to the land. Like, I've been doing a kind of speed run through the Iron Age.
mhm.
I can make legitimate traces to both of them having kingdoms in the area at the same time.
Oh, of course.
The kingdom of Philistine, for example.
I don't know if I mean that's where the name Palestinian comes from, but I don't think that the
There's an obvious
Palestinian.
intermix of Arab cultures that comes successively afterwards. But
Yeah.
But there's not that much separation between them. Like there is a concept of Arabness that goes back into the concept of Jewishness. In a lot of ways, the concept of being Jewish is more defined by not being Arab than it is by anything else. At least in ancient times. Like there's
I think
the whole there's a whole bit about Abraham and Sarah and Abraham and his servant. Basically, Abraham fathers two distinct bloodlines. One of them is the Jews, and one of them is the Arabs. So,
yeah,
like,
but that's
not like necessarily like what happened, but this is the story they're telling themselves.
Yeah, and they each claim descent from one of those brothers, the Ishmael and Isaac.
Yes,
but I mean, there's no historical.
well, there's very little. There's
completely historical.
Yeah, the Bible, or rather the Old Testament, is not necessarily a source of history, but it's certainly a source of myth making.
It's a source of myth making. It's also, I think you can make an argument, and I think you're trying to say this here too, that I mean, there's a Canaanite Levantine origin from both these groups to that's a partial contributor to both of these groups.
Yes.
And a significant, not just partial, but significant.
Well, the thing I noticed, I would note about that territory, particularly in reference to the Bronze Age and the Iron Age afterwards, I see you, Avery. I know you want to go eat the cat's food. We're almost done. That's territory. Palestine, in general, sits between Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Assyria. It makes sense that groups move in and out, or like, for example, the Neo-Assyrians who resettled and Jewish people out of the Upper Kingdom. Not the Upper Kingdom, but
Neo-Babylonians, you mean?
the
Assyrians were
Neo-Babylonians,
gone,
and then like all of that. Like, there makes sense that there's a not inconsiderable amount of intermingling, because that's settlerism right there is what they're doing. Like, they're spreading these things and they're creating conditions for the diaspora. So it makes sense that everything like is intermingled but spread out. Like, this territory is basically a crossroads for armies throughout much of the first half of human civilization.
And that's largely how I think that Israelite religion, I mean the distinctive Israelite, not the other Canaanite ones, but the distinctive branch of Canaanite religion originates, actually, is essentially this group dealing with, outside oppressors, and especially I think they trace the Babylonian exile of the elite of that tribe as a formative moment of Yahwism, of it shifting from polytheism to monolatry, and then eventually to
monolatry, I was
monotheism.
about to say, is probably more accurate at that point. Like if you read particularly the Tanakh, in particular, especially Leviticus and the last 3 books, is very concerned with war.
For sure.
And combat in that area, and they're naming polities that we know existed. So even if the order of events isn't necessarily accurate, there's some core there that has to have truth to it. So they present the rise of the United Monarchy, which is in itself disputed, but the Old Testament presents this as I apologize for overly Christianizing that. The Old Testament presents this as a fairly coherent narrative for David and Joshua. Not the case, probably. Doesn't seem to work that way. And there's absolutely no archaeological evidence that they were ever in Egypt for any length of time. That entire story tickles me fancy, because it takes only 8 days to walk from Giza to Jerusalem. So 40 years is quite the stretch.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I don't even think you could wander the Sinai for 40 years and
no, you could cover. You would probably cover almost every part of it.
Like, you'd have to walk back and forth, like trample the entire thing down.
What's interesting is how the Exodus myth might have came about, and I know that Egypt did have sway there at some point. Like,
they held it throughout most of the Bronze Age.
So there is probably some oral history, maybe memory, coming from Canaanite tribes of that, and certainly some groups of them, I'm sure, were pressed into slavery. But the Exodus story is definitely a it's not. There's no archaeological evidence.
So military history has factoid for you. The first battle in human history that we have reliable record of, that we can talk about in some detail, is the Battle of Mount Megiddo in around 1457 BCE. Where it is the Egyptians versus Canaanites. These are Bronze Age armies that make extensive use of things like chariots, for example. So like the keys there, like a lot of Egyptian expeditions end up going into Canaanite lands. So it makes sense that they have a certain understanding, like an oral tradition of like what Egypt is like, what Egyptian armies are like, right? Like there are keys there. The fascinating bit to me that I can't put a reasonable guess to is where they get the Zoroastrian concepts that get imported into Judaism.
That's where you start to have a dualist not dualist, but
a monotheistic and a good god and evil Satan type bit that occur. Like, where did that come from? Because it doesn't seem like the Babylonian exile doesn't seem to match properly. Because other things come from that.
Obviously, that is an influence brought on by the Persians.
It has to be, but I don't know
by
when.
their mingling with probably after they were freed by Cyrus. I would argue that. And you know what's interesting is that the first use of the term Mashiach in the Bible, or Messiah, is actually to Cyrus.
Yes.
And that's the sad thing, actually, is there's this very close relationship between Persians and Jews, and sadly that's not really due to the Iranian Revolution mainly, but even before the Shah, before the Shah was removed, Israel's closest ally was Iran. So you have this ancient link between those two people in friendship, and then that's kind of it's superseded now by political political adversaryship or whatever.
Hey, Bluestone, nice to see you. There's again, exploring the ancient history is hard. I'm running into a lot of the same problems when I inadvisably decided to include Akkadians in a research paper.
I remember when you told me that you were doing that in your for your thing, like that for your case study. I thought it was very difficult, because the further back you go, especially when you go back into the Bronze Age, you're really not in a good position to do research because there's so little that we know.
It was very difficult, but I'm a very good historian, so I succeeded.
I would like to read that study sometime.
I'll have to find it.
It's interesting.
That was a long research project. Oh Jesus! Do you know how long I spent looking at pictures of steles?
How long?
About 2 weeks.
Yeah, that sounds about right if you're gonna write about the Akkadians.
Yeah, I had a fragmentary poems and steles to work from. I'm like, God damn it! You know who's stupid right now? I'm pretty damn dumb.
Was that before the pandemic?
Yes.
Because you could have. I know you were living in Chicago when that happened. Really could have benefited for taking a visit to the Oriental Museum in I don't think they call it the Oriental Institute anymore. The Near Eastern Museum at University of Chicago. It's great. Absolutely fantastic, by the way. And it's so unknown compared to all the other museums. But if you're looking for Akkadian stuff, that's the place to go. And you can actually still find professors at U Chicago that are, experts in Akkadian or Sumerian that can actually read it and, that study those documents.